Cloud Foundry After Dark. Here we are, once again. How'd the week go for everyone?
And the sun is shining, actually, in summer.
It's after dark on the East Coast.
I met this guy. I didn't even know.
Hey,
It will
guys.
be dark here for hours.
Hey, Lauren.
How you doing?
Pretty fantastic. Let's see. Cloud Foundry muted Jonathan Curtis. I was so pumped for this one, Clay. I told Lauren to join. Holy cow, there's Diego.
It's a party. So did anything happen last week in the Cloud Foundry ecosystem?
It was a really quiet week in the ecosystem. I mean, I think a lot of people were on vacation. Nothing much really happened. Hold on, Cornelia is asking me if CFAD After Dark is tonight. I'm like, yes.
I met Andrew Dice Clay Schaefer.
Apparently,
That was my highlight.
Someone even added Andrew Dice, Clay, Lloyd, Weber, Schaefer once to me when they were talking about him.
Yeah, they just keep adding new names at Pivotal Office, I think.
Cornelia's here.
Hello.
So was there anyone that met anywhere or did anything with Cloud Foundry last week?
Pretty quiet week.
What was your favorite part of the week, James?
My favorite part of the week? That's a tough call because Summit was amazing. But sad part about Summit for me was I was really busy with a lot of customer meetings, briefings there, like at the Summit. So I actually finally got to start watching everything this weekend because I couldn't make it to all the talks. Like,
have you ever actually made it to one of my talks?
I've made it to some of them, yeah.
Which one?
Saturday night, Stephanie was yelling at me. She's like, "Can't you stop with Cloud Foundry, James, just for a minute?" And I was like, "No, I have to watch Diego's talk from 18F." Like, what is this? And I'm like, "No, I have to watch it. I have to watch it." So she sat there with me while I heard Diego say, "DevOps is hard." It was really cool. So thank you, Diego. Stephanie, come here and say hi. No, come here and say hi. I'll chase you down with a laptop.
So there's only 40 hours of stuff to watch.
It's so amazing. Today I watched Garmin again. I watched Kroger again. I watched Allstate again.
Where's Steph? I got all excited about Steph, and now she's not here.
She split down the hallway, and she says, "If you show me online in my glasses, I'll kill you." That's what she mouthed to me.
She will kill you. So I would take her at that because she's an awesome woman.
No, but Diego, thank you. You gave me a Saturday night date. It was a great talk.
I was hoping that your date would be nicer than hear me talk.
Which one are you in?
So Summit was cool, and we could talk about that, Clay, but there was also, and this is unbelievable, that there was something even remotely that size.
Hey, James.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I'm here with Ed Bender, and from Fastly, and he said there was a different URL that was tweeted.
Oh.
So you just might want to check that.
I tweeted the wrong one.
So there's a couple people hanging out with Ed and a couple people hanging out with us.
Cool. We can do our own thing here.
Here, Clay. Let me erase my tweet.
That was important.
No, that is important.
The one I tweeted works, I think, right?
I thought I just grabbed the one about. Anyway, I'll delete my tweet and feel free to share the link that we have right now.
Ben seems to be James seems to be having a little problem. Is that just for me?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
That's just for you, actually, Andrew.
All right. This must be my network.
I'll share.
I'm pretty sure that I followed the link that you tweeted, James.
Yeah.
Is it mine that's broken? One sec. Anyway, carry on. I'll fix.
So Summit was amazing, and we could talk for 3 hours about it, and I hope we do. But the other crazy thing that happened was my boss, Rob Mee, has this kind of incredible house on the top of Twin Peaks that he bought, and it's got this huge wine cellar in it that overlooks the city. And so we had a financial services dinner, and we're very popular in financial services dinner on Wednesday night after Summit was over. And it was the same day that CIO of JP Morgan, George Sherman, finally went public with their Cloud Foundry plans at JP Morgan with the big endorsement in the Wall Street Journal. So to cap off a day that we're in the Journal with the CIO, the biggest financial institution in the world, endorsing us with a dinner of about 15 of the top financial services companies in the world, and my boss's private wine cellar overlooking the city, talking nothing about CF, that was also a good day. So anyway, those are my topics, Clay. Lauren, you were an outsider there. You're from this networking company, Cisco. What did you think walking into like app automation heaven at Cloud Foundry Summit?
Well, I will say that it was interesting, and I think you'll enjoy this comment. I ran into everyone I've worked with when I was at BEA and at IBM.
Mm-hmm.
Just across Cloud Foundry with Sam and Bala from IBM BlueMix and Peter Humphrey, and just a lot of great folks were there that I've worked with in the past, and it was phenomenal to be there. It was phenomenal to see the energy. I really don't see that energy at a lot of conferences lately. And the excitement and the packed rooms, Andrew and I were sitting in the back of a room, for a keynote. We were just on the floor, just kind of seated in the back. There was just no seats, right? It was phenomenal. And from the Cisco side, we were super pumped to be there, and we had a lot of fun, and the team had a great time. So, we'd definitely like to do it again.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. And with your history at BEA, I mean, the main point I made on stage with Mackenzie is that this cloud native Java is changing the world right now in the enterprise space.
Uh-huh.
And people are pretty excited about that, and it's going to have a big impact on that install base of WebSphere and BEA that's out there that had its purpose at the time, but it's been 15 years. So
yeah, there needs to be a shift, right? And there's a shift that's been happening for a while, but fundamentally, I see it still at the fringes a little bit, but I think it needs to happen faster.
I think last week was game on. What did you think, Diego? Did you have a good time?
I had a lot of fun actually, and I was able to meet a lot of the team in Pivotal and some guys at IBM. It was really interesting to see that you're talking. I mean, at least in my industry and government, you're talking with a lot of different people, and everyone. I mean, the people I talk, the people you talk, it seems like everyone is into changing things, and they can't wait to do that. So I think that Cloud Foundry is taking us there. So that's pretty cool. And the summit was really fun, and it was great to see that big of a community.
There's a lot of new faces today, so for the folks at home, I think it might be worth just doing a quick round of introductions. I'm Andrew at Pivotal, and we do stuff over here with some Cloud Foundry. But if you've never been on before, then go ahead and introduce yourself, kind of where you work and what you're all about.
All right, I'll go first, I guess. On the right, I'm Jason Rotella. I currently work for BMPC in Niskayuna, New York, which is near GE Research. Definitely interested in Cloud Foundry for some side projects and possibly to introduce those into our startup ecosystem here in New York State. So involved in that as well.
Cool, welcome.
Thanks.
So this is my first After Dark. I'm Diego Lapidus. I'm working at 18F, which is a consultancy inside the government for the government. It's part of the United States Digital Service you might have heard about. And I'm using Cloud Foundry open source to build the platform. All of us. So that's me.
And Diego gave a talk at Summit last week if people want to see the full 20-minute version. It's well worth checking out.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm new. I'm Edward Bender from Fastly.
I felt like the good guy in a movie where they're getting the death ray from the bad guy. Just like,
Oh, you're gonna have to unmute, Lauren.
oh, it's an adorable dog.
So, hi, I'm new to the Hangout. I'm Ed Bender from Fastly. I head up our cloud integrations and partnerships of this sort. And this is Pippin, my dog.
Welcome, and Pip.
Great, and I'm Lauren Cooney. I think I know most of you guys. I run software strategy at Cisco, which is a lot of technical, new initiatives that we're driving from open source to, full-on Cisco products. So do a lot of work in the open source area and was super excited to be there last week and super excited to hopefully work more with Cloud Foundry.
Awesome.
Awesome. I guess I can go next. My name is Paulie Comtois. I just recently left Chef. I was at Chef for 4 years as their VP of Operations, and that was an awesome run. It was basically I came in as employee like number 23, I think, and they're at like 200 now or a little more. So that was pretty fun and working with those guys, and I loved it. I recently left to join a company called Hearst, which is probably more well known for their publishing, but I'm in charge of the HBM side, the business media side, so that's 15 different individual businesses that we're trying to bring lean, agile, and DevOps to. Some of them are actually still really heavily focused on waterfall and sort of old approaches. Some of them are rebooting their entire stack, and so we don't even know what language we're going to develop the new stuff in yet. And so it's really fun. It's a lot of exciting stuff to be working on, and really great folks. And Cloud Foundry actually is very near and dear to me because I have a lot of use for it, and so just really starting to get in. I missed last week, unfortunately. I was in New York and then Miami, and I was really bummed that I missed the conference, but I'm going to be down for Velocity later this month, and really excited to start talking to you guys. So
The Cloud Foundry Foundation went ahead and recorded all those talks for you.
No, yeah, I've been watching them. They're awesome, but what I missed was exactly what we were talking about earlier, which is that vibe, right, of being there and being a part of that. And conferences have started to sort of dip off in that sort of excitement. And I definitely been noticing. I'm curious to see what Velocity is going to be like next week, if it can be what it was. And I wonder if we're starting to approach that trough of disillusionment and whether or not that's something that we're seeing more at conferences. So I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Peak conference.
What's that?
Peak conference.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks. I'm really excited to be here.
That's awesome to have you. I know the Hearst folks have been looking to hire more and more digital natives for a long time. Various people in my network have gotten pinged by Hearst over the years, so that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that they're, forward thinking. So.
Fantastic. One more.
I think the rest of us are pivotal people.
Oh no, that's right. That's right.
It'd be great to just hear who's on the call, though, for folks that are new, I think.
Sure, I'll say hello. This is James Bear. I work on the product team at Pivotal and Cloud Foundry. And I love all the new blood. This is really fun.
Cornelia's next, and then Ben's a troublemaker, and then we'll get.
I'm Cornelia. I also work for Pivotal in the Cloud Foundry product team. I head up a group of platform engineers who are field-facing engineers going deep with customers and partners, kind of co-innovating with them.
I'm Ben Black. I work at Pivotal on the Trouble team.
All trouble, all the time.
So if you're in the market for trouble, we have extra.
Internet of trouble.
Internet of trouble.
So looking, when I was outside looking in, I was really excited for some of the talks. One of them was Garmin, didn't disappoint. Allstate was huge. Is there any points that kind of I know you watched all these things today. What stood out to you, James, listening to the stories and just the transformation and how people are applying our technology to their business?
You know, it's one of these things. So John Reimer made a kind of ridiculous quote in the New York Times article, sorry, the Wall Street Journal article about J.P. Morgan endorsing us, and it shows that how Cloud Foundry is shocking the world right now, because I think a lot of people thought that we were less mature as a product, that you could actually just turn on and use than we are. And so there's this amazing ringing endorsement from George Sherman, who is the very smart CIO of J.P. Morgan. And then John Reimer sort of lobs in this, I thought, somewhat lazy analyst quote where, like, well, this is very bleeding edge technology. You need to be someone like J.P. Morgan to make use of it, and yada, yada, yada. And, I mean, John Reimer lives in the Bay Area. He did not come to Summit, and he has really no idea what's going on. And I think that's what's so cool about the energy at Summit, was that there is a group of insiders who get how real this is. And my favorite thing that people kept saying was the platform works. I think Diego's talk said that this thing works. Comcast said the platform just works. Garmin said, yup, it works. Kroger said, yeah, this is amazing. It would have taken us an incredible amount of effort. Humana said, yup, it works. And so there weren't a lot of the figuring out how to make Cloud Foundry works talks. What was amazing for me is that everyone was like, oh, wow, this works. And now that asks unfair questions of our organization that we have today, because we're so much less efficient than the platform. And that was the resounding crescendo, I thought, of the Zitney talk, which is, he said, with the platform, 15 minutes. With our current organization, 100 days. And he's like, I'm here to change the world with that.
I think it's also worth noting, to the point you just made, that all this excitement was coming from companies that are traditionally enterprise, Fortune 500, slow-moving, and mostly from the flyover states.
Yeah, this is why I thought the Reimer quote, I mean, even though in a sense you could imagine me being defensive about it, it's just like when I went and I saw it, when I saw that quote after all these talks from normal Fortune 500 companies that just plug the thing in and get, and they, as I said, talking with Josh on stage, they arbitrage between themselves and Netflix and Google almost instantly. Like, I just thought that was a ridiculous quote to make. But it shows that this is so radical, and people didn't expect something to be this effective this fast. So I think that's why the vibe was so hot, which was people were getting real results with this. That was the one thing that resonated with me.
Hey James, can I ask a question, and you can not answer this, but one of the things that I was wondering is, were the majority of folks there, like, it looked to me like they were developers, right? Which was great, right? Because you show up at a lot of these shows and you get press and you get media and you get marketing and you get all that sort of stuff. But it actually seemed like these were technical people at this show versus just, supporting casting, what's going on, right? And that's not a knock to them, but it's actually, for me, it's a hopeful sign that this is, part of a comeback of, in-person developer conferences versus meetups and virtual events.
I think it was 50-50. There was definitely a contingent of practitioners, but having been to many, purely practitioner conferences, there was definitely a little bit of a vendor vibe and a little bit of a business vibe, in addition to the developer vibe.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of users there. I mean, so Pivotal. The other thing I'd say, without pruning my feathers too finely, is that Pivotal had 10 or 11, I can't quite count, Fortune 500 style speakers using Pivotal CF. Diego was one of Diego and the Latter-day Saints Church, the two talks with OSS, which is cool. There were 0 IBM Bluemix customers speaking there. There were 0 HP customers speaking there. And so it was almost an embarrassment of riches, I think, for Pivotal. And
they used Pivotal Cloud Foundry.
It was name dropped everywhere. And the thing that I loved about that is that, like, I don't mean this the wrong way, but we kind of earned that because we're 90% of the contribution. We blood, sweat, and tears to really make a product that truly works versus using an open source community to market ourselves. And I think that's another thing that John Reimer had said before at Forrester. Blows my mind, this guy. He said, yeah, I guess if you're using Cloud Foundry, IBM is the only mature way of doing it. So there's just a lot of misinformation in the market up until this week, and I think we kind of burst on the world and we crescendoed it with the Wall Street Journal endorsement on Wednesday. So it shows how very few people that are commentators really understand technology at all. Most of them are just kind of
Hey, you know what? We should stop talking about that dude, and instead talk about the fact that for everyone else, it's
yeah. For everyone else, is what?
a hobby.
Yeah.
Cloud Foundry is our life.
No, so the people that were there though they were real, like the people that we got out Pivotal. This is where I'm sorry, long-winded, blah blah blah. I'm just so excited.
I'm talking about IBM and HP though, right? Like
oh yeah,
the sideline for them, right?
Ben has an amazing quote about IBM and HP, which is they brought demos to a product war. That was like I think an amazing quote.
I'm just calling it.
It's fair. But just to be clear, like Pivotal, then how you get to the makeup of who is there. Like we worked really hard for every account that was looking at or using Cloud Foundry to get their architects, their developers, their operators, all there. And so that was who you saw. You saw all these companies like Garmin's architecture team was there, Comcast architecture team was there. These are real practitioners, Lauren. So I think that's a lot of the relationships we used to bring in. It's not like we were bringing in analysts or media or press to a marketing event. We were bringing out the teams that are using our software, flying them in some cases.
We definitely put it out there. We went into our community and our customers and gave them the opportunity to tell their stories.
I think the other thing that was pretty cool, that in addition to like the actual customers and vendors, you had an ecosystem of consultants that were there too that actually are like Stark and Wayne or Cloud Credo, some of the others that are actually able to basically earn a living as consultants, helping organizations transform and bring this technology into organizations and help them with it. And that just seeing that it's not just some kind of vendor-driven thing, that there's actually independent people that are coming and helping with it. That was pretty neat too. People doing talks, people talking about the way they've extended the platform. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I was there for Sunday night, and I think those independent consultants like Stark and Wayne, Cloud Credo, ECS, that have really gone deep on this are an invaluable part of this because they've got a lot of deep knowledge and they are independent, and so people, I think, really trust them. And so right now, Dr. Nick from Stark and Wayne has started to get really excited about Concourse as well, and just the way that those hardcore people fertilize the community is, I think, super invaluable.
But the other thing there is, Stark and Wayne a year ago was just Dr. Nick, and I think Wayne. Now I think it's 11 people.
Yeah, and I think Cloud Credo's up to 26 people. There's just pure Cloud Foundry consultants.
And it's pretty much just Cloud Foundry and Bosch all the time, or Elastic Runtime and Bosch.
Yeah, and then Mark Carlson from ECS, who we've started to bring into various engagements in Colorado and otherwise, they're coming on strong as well. We're keeping a lot of folks busy.
Hey, this is Jason. I had a question for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. I've noticed it looks like lately, right, you've broken up the monolithic previous implementation of Cloud Foundry into some additional Go components, basically, right? Diego, the Go router, and aggregator, and so forth. I've also noticed there's been integration with some of these other open source projects from the Apache Foundation, for example, Brooklyn, and and also, like you said, some contributions back to the code base via Cloud Credo and so on. I guess my question surrounding all that is, how much of that gets sort of reintegrated back into the project as core code, and how much of it is very sticky, I guess, very tightly integrated infrastructure code that works hand in hand with these other projects? So I would be concerned at some point that maybe some of the integrity of the Cloud Foundry code is lost if it's used in too many different places, possibly gets migrated in too many different end locations.
So there's a couple ways.
That?
I'll answer this, and I'm sure James and both Jameses have opinions. The architecture of Cloud Foundry was always these components, but there wasn't always a good way for you to deploy them independently. And so some of the stuff that we've done and some of the things you see with Ladder is you can actually see these components working independently instead of swallowing the whole pill of Cloud Foundry at once. And then with respect to the way that those integrations work, and particularly the Apache Brooklyn, the integration there is actually just plugging into Cloud Foundry's existing service broker model. So there's not really any compromise with respect to the framework internally. You're just leveraging the design from the beginning to have these systems be pluggable and take advantage of decisions that were made quite early in the project.
I have an opinion on that front as well, which is that it's an indicator of the deep value in the platform itself, that people want to take pieces of it and use it other places, right? Like, it's that rich. So I don't think it ever compromises the platform for people to do that. And in fact, I would say the opposite, that the more people try and use it in surprising and unusual ways, the stronger the platform will get, right? People will break it in ways that we hadn't anticipated them using it, and that will get fed back into the platform one way or another. And so ultimately, this sort of exploration is nothing but positive.
Yeah, I'll add something to that too. Is I thought I heard a little bit of like concern that if a bunch of people are like contributing code from different places, that Cloud Foundry might get bigger and bigger and bloated, and you might have to take all these other contributions with you too. But it's actually part of what I like to call open for extension. And so there's all these natural extension points in Cloud Foundry that are completely optional. Things like build packs, services, CLI plugins, BOSH releases, and we're probably even going to go further in the future to make the certain components more pluggable. So really, it just gives you a bunch of options, but there's this kind of core bits of Cloud Foundry that have all these extension points. But if you don't want to use Apache Brooklyn, it's not even installed by default. That's something you add as an add-on. But once you have it there, then there's a whole bunch of Brooklyn blueprints now you can use with the platform. So it's really just a natural extension point and exactly what we want and intend.
Is Cloud Foundry basically setting up the criteria for creating those extensions, or is it more or less just go forth and conquer?
Well, there's just a couple of natural places where you see it. So a service is a place where, let's say, it's a kind of this generic term that it's a placeholder for provisioning something, and that could be a database, could be an email service. It doesn't have to actually be a tangible thing. It could be anything. But there's like 4 lifecycle events that create, and then we have one called bind, where you actually associate that service with an application. So like in the case of binding an application with a database, you're going to get some database credentials stuck into your application's environment variables. And then we also have the reverse of that, which is unbind and deprovision, which is like delete. And so we just have these very simple concepts. And now anyone can, like, if you think about it in terms of like a Java interface, it's like 4 methods, and now anyone can implement that with a concrete class, and now they have a service. But you can implement these, they're REST interfaces, right? So you can implement these service brokers in any language, and some people actually even go further. They actually implement the data service itself to be hosted in the platform, but you could actually do it in a much different way. Like if you have a DB2 mainframe or something like that, you want it that's not actually going to be provisioned on the platform, but you just want to connect into. It allows you to hook into those things too. And so really, it's just yeah, we have these natural places like a CLI plugin or other places like that. But what I'm trying to refer to is that there may be other places in the future where we say, hey, this is a natural extension point, and if you don't like the thing we have, you might be able to swap in and bring your own. We haven't really identified all of those yet, but we watch the community really closely. Like if you saw Summit, there was some people that talked about integrating tightly with their F5 instead of using the routing from Cloud Foundry. So that's an area we're going to watch really closely. If there's a lot of people doing stuff like that, then we're going to take a look at it real seriously and see where we want to make things more extensible.
Yeah, it sounds like it'll fit nicely into some of the companies I have that are really strongly into microservices and really trying to decompartmentalize those sort of monolithic builds that we have now that are problematic. And it takes 6 hours only to find out that it didn't work, and you've got a whole night ahead of you of another build. So we're trying to break those apart. So that sounds great.
The service broker model is also the way that you can leverage investments that you've already made into systems of record or other types of automation, so that you're not just starting fresh. Everything has to be on the platform. I assume most places that are, especially these enterprises, they're running billion-dollar businesses through these systems of record, and this just gives you a way to leverage those data sources and bring them into your new cloud-native applications.
Yeah, I think that's an important other theme, though, here is, and Cornelia is really deep on this, spends a lot of time with customers on this. Garmin and Kroger both said switching to Cloud Foundry gave us an opportunity to refresh our whole application architecture. And Diego expressed it as a limitation, like, hey, just 12-factor apps run on Cloud Foundry today. So I think we're still looking to expand to the exact right amount of application footprint that we can accommodate in a cloud-native way, make it very resilient, easy to do service discovery on. So, for instance, we're adding short-running tasks with Diego, which is a little bit harder to do today. But I think we're on the right side of history of application design, and that was the other chart I showed at Summit, which was Spring Boot passed, which is the kind of lightweight way of doing Java, passed 1.2 million downloads in April. So this is a mega trend too that's helping drive the demand for something like Cloud Foundry. Whereas if you were doing monolithic apps 5 years ago, Cloud Foundry doesn't make as much sense. But once you lean into this new architecture, it's sort of like a godsend. So I think part of the reason the excitement's so big this year is that app trend is really what defines the market more than the automation trend in a way. So
well, as you go to a world where you have microservices, you have that many more deployments to manage. And if your fixed cost of deployment is high, then that's a very expensive operation.
Yeah, so Cornelia, did you spend any time with any of the folks that you have been working with at Summit? What did you think of the Cloud Native Talk Track at Summit when you were there?
Yeah, so I got to see almost no sessions because I spent so much time talking to those customers. But yeah, there was one in particular that comes to mind when we're having this conversation. It's very interesting. It's a customer with whom we were doing a proof of concept. And initially, their attempt was to lift and shift an existing monolithic app onto the platform, which isn't that unusual for people to try that, because before they really understand what Cloud Foundry is about, they kind of see it as just another platform to load applications onto. And they got about 2 weeks into the POC, and they were really pretty unhappy with things because they weren't able to lift and shift. And so we engaged a bit deeper and explained a bit more, and they had all of those limitations that they were talking about, that you couldn't have multiple ports, or you couldn't go in and control the port numbers or control the IP addresses and those types of things. And so we kind of went in and we reshifted the POC, and what we did was we took their monolithic app and we looked at what are some of the major functions that you want to do, and we pulled one of those functions out. And we left all the other ones in place, by the way. We just pulled one of them out and did a bundled it as a microservice. They didn't have to change much code at all because it was already components within the application. So they were able to extract the code and rebundle it as a microservice, deploy it on Cloud Foundry, bind to a couple of services at the back end, do some auto scaling, and they're delighted. And it was really the word that I use all the time is it was a recasting of their requirements, a recasting of what they saw as limitations into strengths. And that happens time and time again as people really start to understand the benefits of PaaS. Of course, then they also saw the benefits, the really great benefits of, hey, I can scale these things independently. It didn't take them long at all to see that recasting of limitations into strengths.
In most cases, those limitations are the basis of the contract that lets the platform keep promises.
Bingo.
So if you want to do all these other things, if you want to have state and you want to have all this order-dependent automation, that's great. But then when something fails, How are you going to recover it? What state are you in? How do you unwind the machine that you put together in a certain order and get it back together? And so by adhering to a contract, the platform can keep a lot more promises to you.
Precisely.
I really love that that approach. I'm gonna steal that, but I'll give you all the credit, Courtney. We have a similar problem with some of the sort of monolithic apps in actual data centers, and even moving to anything that's sort of virtualized is scary for them. And so, the idea of taking that apart and saying, you know, look, we're not going to lift all of this at one time and dump it into the cloud. I know that's too scary for you. So rather, how about we take a sort of phased approach and compartmentalize this again, right, and sort of tear it apart. It's just ones and zeros flying across wires anyway, so it really shouldn't matter where it lives as long as we've done the work to couple these things together in a seamless fashion and high availability. And I really like that approach, and I think that actually will help me quite a bit with getting people a little more comfortable with getting rid of the old sort of. I think of it sort of as old school architecture of, you know, rack and stack, and let's go to the data center and check the lights on the hard drives and make sure that they're all green. It's like, you know, you just can't continue that way any longer.
Yep. It's almost like there's a new era.
Well, you know, some of us get there faster than others, and so, you know, I have to also learn that not everyone's running at the same speed, and so, and that's an issue for me, coming from Chef, where we all ran at as fast as we possibly could go. You know, and I moved to a bigger organization where it's... Yeah, exactly.
Hey, here's a quick request. Hey, Edward and Lauren, some people are trying to get in. Can you guys sit together and then free up one slot for someone else to come in? And then if anyone's out there in Twitter land, we can also answer questions on Twitter if you want to throw things in the queue.
I just wanted to say one thing about what you were talking about. Not only restrictions become strengths, but also like having a platform allows us to speak the same language. And I think that's very important. You know, in the team, we all know, like, whether you're doing a Go app or a Ruby app, we all, you know, have the same kind of structure in them. And I think that's really important.
That can be very meaningful when you get to the point where that's a central point where everyone has the same metaphor, everyone has the same, you know, kind of focus and vantage, instead of everyone having, like, you know, from first principles built up their application in their own special way where no one else has that context.
Totally, yeah.
We got Ed in, so Ed, go ahead and introduce yourself. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Ed, say hi.
Hi.
Now we heard you.
Yeah.
Give us an intro.
What do you do, Ed? 1 second. We don't want to wake people up, maybe. We're moving. We're getting a tour of Ed's house. So what was another favorite talk? One of my favorite things, and this isn't just about the summit, but it's this press release that also came out from CenturyLink. And the reason it's meaningful to me is these people have been involved in Cloud Foundry for a long time. They've run open source Cloud Foundry as a service, and they chose to use Pivotal Cloud Foundry as a product, as a customer, not only to transform their own internal IT and software development capabilities, but also to kind of position that for their customers as a valuable product that they'll run and manage on CenturyLink Cloud.
I love how much a part of the community they've been. When, you know, they had CenturyLink had made an acquisition of Tier 3, and that Tier 3 team has been a huge part of getting .NET and Windows support onto Cloud Foundry for years, and been working with our teams at Pivotal recently. And like, so when we show like Lattice running Windows containers alongside Linux containers, that CenturyLink team is a huge part of that, and they made it happen. And it's been a really fun thing to see. Like, you know, like most people still think that when you pick these platforms, there's like, you go to an enterprise and it's like, yeah, these business units use Java and these business units use .NET, and you know, going back to like talking about developing a similar metaphors in a vernacular that lets you, if you're using actually the same platform where the apps get deployed, Linux apps alongside Windows apps, and they can be sharing the same data services back and forth. To me, that's exceptionally powerful.
Yeah, Jared and those guys, they definitely they pull their weight. There's tons of stuff that's only been possible from working with them, but it's really gratifying to just see that they chose, after all that experience with Cloud Foundry, running as a service at scale, running the open source, to just see the value that Pivotal is adding on top of the open source and choose that to re-platform their own software development.
All right, Ed, it's back to you.
If you're ready.
Yeah, no, I feel like an honored guest, man. So I'm Ed Anderson. I am maybe no longer the resident Cloud Foundry fanboy, but I work here in Seattle at a startup called RealSelf, and I am the DevOps there. So that is mostly why I am such a big fan of Cloud Foundry, because it relieves many pain points that don't have to be pain points.
And you were previously at a package shipping company in Memphis, correct?
Yes, I did used to work there.
Yeah, that's where we met Ed the first time, and he was sort of like, lost Cloud Foundry there, and I think they're finally coming around to it. So
yeah, it's good things, man. It's good stuff. Plus, it looks like you're doing some nice bundling of some of the Netflix OSS, which is another mighty carrot to have at the end of the stick, I think.
don't get going on that. James Barris is just rolling his eyes right now. He's like, don't get Waters going on Spring Cloud. He'll just never stop.
Hey James, what do you? One of the things that I see, and you mentioned earlier, is that Pivotal's doing 90% of the code donation to Cloud Foundry. Is that what you said?
It's about 95.
95. What are you looking for in terms of other community to come in and contribute? Like, what components? I mean, not companies, but like what components or what pieces, right? I think one of the things that people don't often get clear about when they're looking at using something is that they can contribute the code back to, right? So what do you?
Yeah, I'll give you an example right now where I think Cisco could be doing a lot more. So the NSX team is approaching us. We've got this new concept coming out called placement pools. And placement pools will draw an underlying pseudo-physical network around a series of containers that are mapped to a certain number of VMs. And the NSX team now is all excited to come in and contribute in open source the ability to provision those placement pools through Cloud Foundry Bosch. And we've been really unable to get the Cisco team involved because I think Podmonstery Warrior thinks that that Red Hat is the only interesting company to partner with out there. And the odd thing is that almost everyone around Podma has been saying, like, Cloud Foundry is the future. And I think she's continued to say, whoa, we're getting spammed. Hey, Clay, can you pump that? Can you kick that out? So I would love to. I mean, there was a Cisco partner that just wrote me like, hey, how I want to get involved with Cloud Foundry. How can I get them more involved? And we'd love to have more network automation contributions because right now we use a lot of static networks, and we'd like to do something more dynamic. And I think it's just going to start happening this year. And James Barrett could tell you more there. I think the time is right, and there's going to be a lot of that happening. So, again, I only mention these things not to be negative, just to show that Cloud Foundry surprised a lot of people, right? Like people didn't think this platform approach was really going to be the way to pay off enterprise DevOps, and Diego nailed it in his talk, which is it actually gives you this out-of-the-box ability to do that. So we were a little bit of the underdog, I think, until last week, and then I think the lights started going on as the fireworks shut off from 10 Fortune 500s.
I think with open source, what's really critical is that you don't focus on the company, you focus on the need in the community.
Yeah.
Because it's not about Cisco and it's not about NSX, it's about building the best product for the community. and for the customers, right? And I think that, taking that approach, from the Cisco perspective, right? And I'm not speaking for Cisco here. I can say that it's important to me that we work to customers for success, right? And if they want certain features or functionalities, of course, that's something that we should be doing, right? But as every big company has, there's lots of different pockets and things like that. So, but if you identify the areas of need versus the companies that need to be engaged, often you get more code from that.
Well, and that's where James Jerk can show you. We have very public trackers of all the next stories we're going to work on. So, as an example, Huawei noticed that we were working on this Linux container technology called Garden, and they jumped right in, and they've been just taking stories off the backlog and contributing them to our London team. So it's all public. It's all up there to jump in. Anyone can do it. And then if you want to do something new, you can contribute it to the Cloud Foundry incubator and get it promoted from there. So all of our backlogs are completely public. You can watch every story we're working on every day.
Cool. Well, you should definitely send me a link, given that I run most of outbound open source at Cisco.
That's why I invited you on, Lauren.
I know, James.
Thanks for the help. I don't mean to bust Podman too hard. It's just
she's great. I really enjoy her. I think she's wicked smart, and I just think it's a big symptom of a big company there.
I know. I just every great thing climbs a wall of worry, so I don't even mind sharing the worries that we've had along the way. It's sort of like par for the course.
No, I hear that. You guys have war stories. I get it.
Ben Black, what did you think of Summit? You made a really interesting T-shirt. You want to tell people about your T-shirt?
Yeah, it was okay. It was pretty cool, I guess. Which T-shirt?
I don't know. Which T-shirt did you make, Ben?
Well, I made one for you that you refused to wear because you're a jerk and you hate me. Where's your shirt, James?
No, you made me a shirt that said King of Paz.
Yeah.
Which wasn't good because King of Paz is the handle that used to be Fake Waters James, which was a parody of my humble self that Brent Smithhurst from ActiveState made and was behind for a couple of years. And I've never busted Brent for parodying me for 2 years, but I just did.
And so I totally didn't set you up for that.
You didn't need to. But I didn't want to wear the King of Paz shirt because I didn't want people to think that I had been like Fake Waters James all along. That's like my life's way too boring to also parody myself.
Well, now that everyone knows, you can also wear that shirt with pride.
Yeah. So, hey,
I guess the one that that other people were commenting on was my carefully sharpied CF as fuck T-shirt.
That was actually, like, people hate to admit it, but a lot of people thought that was pretty legit. That you had sort of a punk rock Sharpie shirt on, and it's a little bit explicit, and I don't like to swear, but it had a certain je ne sais quoi of authenticity about it.
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, James speaks French.
A certain conference savoir-faire.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna. There it is. Hey, look. I took a picture of it so that everyone can enjoy it. I'll drop that into chat there.
Oh God.
I don't want anyone to miss it. You brought it up. I was just happily listening. So I will say I noticed that this CF After Dark has turned into sort of a mini CF Summit in that no longer is it a bunch of pivotal talking heads echo chambering, but it is, I would say, half of these folks are not pivotal, and lots of folks who are really enthusiastic about actually successfully using CF to solve their problems. So I would say more of that, please.
We're able to get a little outside contribution along the way on the old After Dark. It's not always as pivotal. Although we did get plenty of Waters' opinions earlier. We'll go forward with nothing but positivity.
I'm looking at Paulie here and Ed and Diego. Right. These are not us talking about how awesome we are. It's other people talking about how awesome we are, which is much more meaningful, I think.
Hey, yeah, you're awesome. Yeah, we all know that.
Actually, I'm more interested in hearing how awesome they are.
I think it's more about helping others be awesome than being awesome ourselves. I think the only thing that's fun about it is the project was sort of high risk in its initial conception, and so it's kind of great to have gone from promising to undeniably like breakout over the last 2 weeks. I thought that's the only reason I'm mentioning it.
I mean, as nice as it is to hear a story about Cloud Foundry, when you see Garmin and Allstate talk about what they're doing, it just means there's that much more great software that hopefully makes everything else better.
And to echo something James said earlier, you know, my favorite talk at Summit, even above Unsie's incredible breakout on containers, which was just spectacular, and everyone should go back and watch that video, was Allstate, because the message there was really something I think that drives us, and that is that this is not about technology, that they were looking at CF as a way to transform the whole company. And that's actually something that's come up with a surprising number of Fortune 50 folks, is that this is a tool for them to essentially make their company competitive, not just to ship some software.
I love any project that's really all about what you can create in the technology and less about the egos involved in creating that technology. And so, honestly, that's probably what attracted me first, and then secondly was how awesome it is, right? But that really reduces the barrier to entry, quite frankly, at least for me.
I love it when we're boring. Like, I think our whole job is to be really the boring part, and the people creating the things is the exciting part. Like, you don't talk a lot about the paper you write your ideas down on. You know, that's kind of what we need to become over time.
Right.
But before you had paper, boy, taking notes was a lot harder on paper.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
I got to sleep through the night again last night. So exciting.
You know, I did a session at Summit on Ops, on Cloud Foundry Ops, because earlier this year I spent a month on the Ops team, which was at times very boring, especially doing deployments. And I talked about a bunch of things, but one of the things that I sprinkled throughout was kind of some of our principles. And one of our principles is that we do deployments of run.pivotal.io during working hours. And when I made that point in the room, which was packed, that was one of the moments where there was like an audible sigh, like an audible response of, you know, what? We don't do deployments at 2 in the morning. We don't do them on the weekends. We do them during business hours when there's other people there to help. Wow. And by the way, nothing goes wrong, rarely. So it was pretty cool.
I think the best part of that story is when you say that you hope things go wrong.
Yeah. I actually, and things did, and I wrote a couple of blogs on it, but when I sat down with my pair, because we pair even in ops, not just in dev, and I said, oh, goody, we're going to do a deployment today. I hope something goes wrong. They were like aghast. But that's, I was there to learn, so that's when you learn, is when things go wrong.
Yeah, ideally you're ready for it, right? Because you've practiced enough and you know what to do when things go wrong. It's when you're flat-footed because you never practice, you never think about it, and then all of a sudden, you know, everything goes to hell at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and there's no one around, and you can't get a hold of anyone. You're there alone, right?
That's what I believe it was Garmin said. You know, they were struggling with their holiday sales. All of a sudden, their products to be super popular. Everyone would go online and activate them, do connected, you know, stuff with them. And they said whenever they had app problems, it was a team of 15 at 1 a.m. just trying to debug it or respond by scaling something up. So they were talking about teams of 15 or 20 for incident response. And they basically, their talk said, that's not called Cloud Foundry Autoscaler, because A, the surface area of changing the app state is so much easier now, and B, you know, it's much easier to respond to latency changes, etc. We'll just know that in the platform. So you think about 20 people not having to wake up at 1 a.m. and being able to wake up the next day happier. It's almost impossible to me that we got into such a state before, like how bad the old was.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that ever since being on the ops team, I'm still on those ops mailing lists, and so I see all of and you probably see them, several of you probably see them as well. But I see that when there is an incident every once in a while, when there's some kind of a page or something, and somebody does have to wake up, it's almost always that they say, yep, woke up. By the time I logged in and checked things, everything was back to normal, and I just went back to bed. And we'll do some kind of a post-mortem tomorrow. But it's not only that we're practicing the deployments, it's that, again, because of these quote-unquote limitations that are really actually benefits in contracts, the system can recover from those things. So there's not 20 people that have to wake up and spend hours. There's one person who rolls over and says, yep, it fixed. I'll check it out in the morning.
And I think that gets to Diego's point around having a common set of constructs and languages that you do. Like, I think the reason you need 20 people in incident response is every app is its own snowflake. Its run book is a snowflake. How you change it is a snowflake. And so you have 20 people up going, how do we touch this without breaking it and fix it? Whereas if every microservice has its own latency and performance metrics, it's got a certain thresholds of auto-scaling, it's very easy to declaratively change its state. You can reason about it. It's not like you have to carve a new tool out of wood live to fix it.
So Stephen Noble, who's a After Dark alumni, asked a question about contributing and what are the training requirements for contributing in Cloud Foundry, pair programming, etc. So I think it's worth James maybe shouting about what we do, and even highlighting the dojo and the stuff that Pivotal makes available to anyone who wants to come spend time with us.
Is Bear still on?
He's muted.
I'm back. I was listening on live, but I missed probably a few minutes as I cut back over. What was the question?
Well, Stephen asked what is the requirement to contribute to Cloud Foundry, and he asked specifically pair programming, etc. And I thought it would be worth answering that in full, and then maybe making a comment or two about the dojo.
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can contribute. By far the simplest is the standard pull request, and so for that there's no each contribution stands completely on its own. There's no prerequisites you have to meet, other than we are somewhat serious about having the contributions go through an IP check, and making sure people sign the CLA so that we can keep the licensing all clean. But outside of that, the actual contribution itself, let's say you're fixing a bug or something like that, we like to have tests for everything that we contribute, and the team that you submit the pull request to would help you with those tests if it doesn't look quite right. And then secondly, if you want to work on something like adding to the platform, definitely reach out on the mailing lists or start an issue on GitHub and talk about the contribution you'd like to make in advance to make sure that's aligned with the project direction. And then what a lot of people have done now, a lot of organizations have come through and done what we call a dojo in one of our offices, where you actually show up for, and this is a little bit a higher bar in terms of commitment, and where you'd come up and you'd spend, let's say, 6 weeks in one of our offices just working on the platform, building the project with us. And you do pair programming with us. You work right out of the backlog, just like the other engineers on the platform. And we can send you some information. It's called the dojo. We ask that people pass a pair programming interview first to make sure that it's going to be a good experience in terms of you have the right baseline coming into that, and that you'll be able to get a lot out of the experience. And then if that's too difficult to do, to actually because that is a big commitment to go work with us for 6 weeks in an office someplace, then what we can say is that we'd love just to engage with people in the community with the mailing list and the pull requests and that model, and that works well too. So that's at the high level.
So maybe it's a little bit of a digression, but these are definitely some of the topics that came up at the Summit as well. Jason asked in the chat, how, if at all, would Diego scheduling semantics or connection to stateful services change to address Internet of Things, data, or control integration? Benjamin?
Did somebody say IoT? So I would actually leave it to James Baer to talk a little bit about the Diego side of that, because I don't actually think that there's anything IoT specific, but there is some interesting stuff going on there. But you did hit on the important part about IoT, which is the integration. And for Cloud Foundry, IoT is, in terms of the things that are specific to IoT, totally dominated by that integration, usually with sort of alien APIs and alien data formats. So as much as possible, I would like the answer to be that there will be no changes whatsoever in Diego to support that, although I'm sure as we dig further into the streaming use cases and the big data integration from our data folks, we'll start breaking Diego a little bit, but that, again, will benefit all. And I think it's data specific rather than IoT specific. Does that answer where you were going with?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Bear, can you talk a little bit about the sort of stateful services story coming together?
Yeah, definitely. So there was a talk at Summit. I think Caleb and Ted, that they did an experiment for several weeks where they added stateful disk reservations to applications and had those scheduled on Diego. And they did a very naive implementation for this first experiment, where basically the first time, if you were to ask for an allocation of some disk, they would allocate you some on an available Diego cell, and then your application would be pinned to that cell going forward, so that it's effectively a placement constraint for that application instance in the future, so that, let's say, your application restarts or whatever, you're always co-located where we can make that disk available. But in talking with others, there's a lot of thought being put into this space in terms of what if we didn't pin the disk, and what if we were able to do things like with software-defined storage, where we could move things around and make it more accessible to the same disk allocation could actually be available on other Diego cells that might use some kind of storage technology that made that happen. So, we're definitely experimenting and playing in this space. And the official party line is, these if you write a BOSH release, you can do this really effectively today. But in the future, we hope that we can expose that as a developer facing feature, that you could actually get access to stateful disk. And that talk that is now available on YouTube from Ted and Caleb should kind of go through like that experience.
James, were you thinking to rely on the underlying IaaS layer to maybe map to disk that's networked, say OpenStack's Cinder, things like that?
Probably not all the way down to that layer, although it's possible. I know I talked to some of the EMC team that was at CF Summit, and they have some interesting acquisitions that do network attached storage, but not so much at the host volume level, but more at using Scale IO as one example, and they had another one. I think I'm going to butcher the name, but like Maginetics, that are both in this space where they're remotely attaching disk. And we do have a mechanism to use a fuse, so you can mount a file system with SSHFS. That's going to be a pretty poor performing single point of failure type of solution. But there might be other places on the gradient that go further that isn't all the way down to mounting because if you have a Diego cell that might have, let's say, 100 containers on it, if each one of those containers had a bunch of volumes mounted, it could get kind of strange on the host. So we'll see. We're just experimenting at this point, but we know that there is demand for that kind of thing, and if we can crack that nut, then it will open up some new workloads that go beyond 12-factor apps.
Yeah, and keep an eye also on the Bosch, tracker. We've invested a lot right now in Bosch of making it better at provisioning things on demand via an API. So I think you'll also see concurrently us investing such that Diego or that Cloud Controller could call out and be like, hey Bosch, I need a full giant cluster. I want you to use these kinds of virtual machines, maybe the whole way down through the normal OpenStack APIs, and get that instantly on demand, taking advantage of the billions of dollars in R&D that have already gone into VM-centric networking and storage, which are pretty advanced. So I think we're hedging our bets there, and we're exploring container-based persistence while also being best in class at on-demand VM node provisioning.
Yeah, and just to take that a little further, like some of these really high-performance data services, they expect to use direct attached storage and other things that actually maybe with a disk pinning or something like that, actually you could do, but then the availability gets more difficult unless you're using some kind of replication.
It just changes the contract and what promises we can keep.
Yes.
And I think that there's a bunch of things we should explore, but there's also some benefit to thinking about. I don't think the strength of these kind of platforms, and you read the board paper, is really an ad hoc automation and stitching all this stuff together. So keep it simple, or fail simple, so you could keep strong promises. And also, as you go to stateful services, I think we need to think more about operationalizing that full life cycle. Like if you have persistent disks, how are you going to back them up? Is there some way to think more about it? Like, do I really want to be the one who's going to take responsibility for your data? And at the level that I can keep my promises, I want to, but otherwise I probably don't.
Can I quote Eric Brewer from earlier today?
Stunned silence. Go ahead, Eric Brewer.
He was talking about something else that Google's doing, but it sounded to me like he was talking about Cloud Foundry. And his quote was, "My main goal is to get developers thinking about their applications as a collection of services where they don't really think about the resources quite so directly," which I think is a good summary of what people were talking about at CF Summit.
Absolutely. Bring the abstraction up one level or two.
Absolutely.
I think that's what's exciting looking at this generation of automation, is that you're getting outside of the notion of a server. Like you could finally have a service as a first-class primitive.
Yeah, but I think that this has been something that Netflix and Twitter and Google have gotten for 4, 5, 6, 10 years, and maybe in Google's case. I think the hard work is getting, the sort of normal enterprises of the world to come along this journey in a way that they're excited about. When you listen to Andy Zitman talk about this at Allstate, and I listened to his talk again, the thing that's interesting is he's like, this company has been so successful. Like just their insurance business subsidizes almost any kind of IT behavior. And so it's especially hard for them culturally to pivot and take on risk. And they kind of needed something like this that does just work. But that's what also gets me excited, because you think about the massive amount of money spent in enterprise IT in the Fortune 1000 on somewhat more wasteful practices, where they have the subsidy of success to justify that. That's what gets me so excited, because it's sort of an economic transformation for the country, because that's where the big amount of spending is, not in maybe just the web startups or just in San Francisco Soma startups. I think it's rare to see that. I mean, Allstate before Cloud Foundry said we hadn't changed our architecture since 2004. That was a direct quote from one of their architects to me, and he said it as if they didn't need to. Like, we did it so well, we haven't had to change it for that long. So you can imagine the kind of change management that happens in I mean, and Diego's in the government. Like as he said, if you ever try to do enterprise DevOps and you think it's hard, trust me, this is harder.
Well, yeah, it seems like the majority of those enterprises are really looking at running legacy code, and that's where the majority of their revenue is being derived, and some of that code is 10, 15 years old in some cases. And if there's not some sort of greenfield new application that you can kind of perch upon and really kind of build these new ideas, then you have to really talk to the business about the value add, right? If you can't convince the business that there's value added in changing the way you've done things for the last 10 years, they're just not going to buy into it, even if it makes total logical sense, right? Logic is not playing into this discussion, right? It's really about how can this revolutionize the business, and you have to start with the business leaders and show value on that side, because you can have a groundswell campaign internally, so this grassroots groundswell campaign where everyone believes in it, and the business leaders almost look at that as a coup, and so it's kind of like, well, we can't disrupt the value stream. It's great that we want to do these things, but we still have to generate the same amount of revenue and hit the same amount of targets.
I think one of the things that's happening, and this is a trend that's been, I think it predates Cloud Foundry to some extent, is that these organizations which have been driven by other things, and I mean other things being not software, are realizing that they have an opportunity to create new top-line revenue if they can create digital experiences that leverage some of their existing assets. And furthermore, it allows them to protect themselves from someone else doing that. And once you make that transition where you're reframing IT as a cost center to a new thing that's an enabler and a competitive advantage, then you open a lot of people's minds, and they realize that, okay, so we've had this architecture, and we've got, I don't know, 100 applications, and we're going to support those, but 5 years from now, we're going to have 1,000 applications. And if we're going to a microservice architecture, maybe even more services. So just framing it as an opportunity and giving people the ability to build their future. When you see Allstate and you see Garmin and you see Humana and Kroger and the rest of them, what they're talking about is not just the status quo. It's about opening up a whole new level for their business.
Garmin was struggling with scaling. They basically said, look, we were a hardware manufacturer. We were used to shipping hardware. We were a $2.5 billion company doing that. But now everybody wants more connected experiences. We're having to become a software company. Allstate said we could be developing so much more functionality if we didn't have IT in the way. I think actually the thing about Cloud Foundry is it's often more business-led than pure technologist-led, because it actually solves an organizational and business need in a more profound way than it uses a lot of existing technologies like Linux container and declarative automation and things you could have done technically before. I think what's new is its organizational and business view of completeness and doing 9 things at once in one platform. Could be wrong.
Another thing that Andy Zitney said that I thought was really great was that there's not been disruption in any kind of disruption in the insurance industry for 80 years, and that they were ready, they're ripe for an Uber style of disruption. So software is eating the world.
I see what you're doing.
So we're 75 minutes into this After Dark. What's our how's everyone's stamina?
Where's the secrets, James?
I think I already dropped a pretty big one tonight. I mean, I'm not. Yeah. Gosh, I'm fresh out. I got to be honest. I'd been hinting about the J.P. Morgan one, and I couldn't quite drop that one because it was so important. The one anecdote that was really fantastic is now that J.P. Morgan sort of, as of Wednesday, they're now allowed to use their own email addresses on our mailing list if they want to. Before they couldn't. That was suppressed. They're now allowed to send pull requests with their real name if they want to. And even cooler, a good friend of mine, Alan Beck, who leads their platform team, we invited him right into our Thursday session on prioritizing all of our work for the next quarter. So we didn't rest on our laurels after Summit. We all got together and hammered on each other about what the most important things we could be doing together were. And it was really cool that Alan from the JPMC team was just there in the room with us for 2 hours, talking about security and other things. Them kind of being this forward about them joining their foundation really enables that kind of behavior in a good faith kind of way. I gave a talk at ApacheCon maybe a year and a half ago, where I said the most exciting thing for Cloud Foundry for me would be if enterprises themselves started contributing back, not just vendors. And if we could get a bunch of the other big players to do that, I think it'd be pretty outstanding. So that's not a secret, but it's kind of cool just to have Alan right in the room. We're doing the good, bad, and ugly of what's going on right now and where we want to go next. You were there, Andrew. What did you think of that?
The meeting, the whole day meeting, or just the parts that Alan got to hang out with us? It was we have a lot of things to work on in Cloud Foundry in general, but when you get someone at that level sitting in a room where we're all throwing back and forth all the things we're concerned, hope, and dream about our own capabilities and our security and the rest of it, I think it's really meaningful. And when people talk about openness and they want to talk about this, that, and the other, and what makes you holier than thou with your open source strategy, just as a customer, come sit in the room with us while we're all at each other's necks about what's the best way to do some of this stuff is another level of transparency I don't think many vendors are providing.
Yeah, Cornelia, you were there. I mean, we had a pretty good week at Summit. I thought we were pretty strenuous on ourselves, actually. Some people said to me, like, oh, why'd you beat yourself up on Thursday after such a good week? And I'm like, I think that's what makes us an A team, is that it's not like we were out drinking for the rest of the week after a good start. We're like, let's do a 10-hour prioritization meeting. Yeah,
it only made the week better. It was just absolutely exhilarating and exhausting the entire week, but that day it made it even better. It was phenomenal. There's so many cool things to be done, and one of the best things, of course, is that we just have this tremendous room of passionate people, passionate, bright, dedicated, awesome people to work with, and that's what makes Pivotal, and that's been what's driving Cloud Foundry, as you said, 95%. So it's an awesome team.
I think, I don't often do this, but Mr. Joe Tucci at EMC is a person that the community needs to thank, because he understands portfolio theory and building new companies, and he writes us a tremendous check every year such that we can attract the best talent and afford to put them all on that team and invest in Cloud Foundry for years and years before it had an ounce of revenue, and give it 100% to the community, all of that on faith. It is maybe worth me dropping one name check to Joe and saying thank you for the huge allowance he's given us to go try and innovate here.
I want to jump in on Wednesday as well, because I want to echo that it was amazing, and the two things that really just kept getting reinforced that whole day, and it really was 10 hours of some very big personalities.
You mean Thursday?
Was it Thursday? You know what?
Wednesday was financial services.
Lost track of all time. Right. Wednesday is dead to me. Is that room was packed. I mean, like, there were 25 people in that room packed together that whole time. Everyone was totally engaged the entire time, including you. I
was going to say the same thing. Waters did not take out his phone for those 10 hours.
Just go with it, James. Just go.
I'm usually checking my phone for Cloud Foundry updates, so why would I do that in that room? That's what it was all about.
But the thing is like, this is a lot of intensity here, right? These are really smart people, really, really customer focused, and I mean, getting into the customer obsession that I love. And there were a number of points that, James, you said you were surprised that essentially there was no dissent on certain issues, and those issues were really around making sure that we delivered the most incredible experience for customers, right? Because we looked at security stuff, and I know that you expected a lot of resistance there, and essentially everyone in the room just said, yes, this is the right thing. How do we take compliance off the table as a concern for customers? How do we ensure that out of the box, their businesses are protected, their customers are protected, and just so much strong support for that. as well as looking at just the sort of application lifecycle side of things, sort of the bread and butter of CF. And again, everyone just all about ensuring that we're doing that right. So that to me was just fantastic. And I think that if you look at Andrew or McKenty or me as sort of representative of how bossy we are, a room full of that, and somehow everyone just hung in there and stayed positive, stayed respectful. It was just, I'm just giddy because it was just amazing.
Yeah.
Cornelia's no lightweight on the assertive front either.
No.
But she puts on a nicer face than I do.
No, what Cornelia will do, and this is if people don't know her, she just gives you the slightly head tilt. And when she gives you that head tilt, that's all it takes for me to go, oh man, I'm screwing up. Just like from here, this is like, hey, I agree with what you're doing. This is, hey, dumbass, I don't know what you're saying.
To quote Hume, truth springs from arguments amongst friends.
I do not play poker because I just
watch for this. If it gets to here, she's just ready to completely come at you.
I'm quietly judging you.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, Paulie. I don't mean to bore you with a bunch of our retro on our team, but it was
No, man, this is how you get the insights.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be part of it. I'm really excited to start looking into this more, and in some places we're starting literally from ground zero, and so it's great to look at. Obviously, I'm highly focused on culture right now, but I can't leave out process and tools, and a lot of that are the building blocks that help me enact cultural change, and so, or at least make permanence a sort of long-term systemic positive change. And so, really, really excited about this. Is a fantastic approach, and I love it. And so, I really appreciate the opportunity to sit in with you guys this evening.
Oh, fantastic! We're obsessed with this. That's why our Sunday nights. I look forward to this all day.
Yeah.
But you should.
Hey, Paulie, I got a quick question for you on that subject.
Yeah.
Have you read Matt Stein's microservices book?
I have, actually. It's really good.
It's awesome.
It is good.
There's 2/3 of the section on how to do change is about people, right? So you're just speaking my language there.
Exactly, and it's great, and so I'm really excited about the opportunity that I have now because I get to take a lot of the stuff that I've been reading and the people I talk to and the conferences and the talks and try to actually make the rubber hit the road and really figure out how to make this a reality for a lot of different businesses. They're in geographically different locations, and so it's kind of interesting to have issues not just around technology, but even just around general approach. Like someone, in Atlanta, as an example, is thinking very differently than LA or New York, and so. But I think that these approaches are sort of universal, even if they have to be tweaked a little bit to figure out how they fit. But
get everyone in one Slack channel. That'll fix everything.
Ironically, I started a hip chat across. So I'm trying to build this greater community across all 15 businesses. In many cases, they didn't even know that they existed in a way. And so, I built a blog where people could start talking about things that succeeded and things that didn't succeed, and start sharing information in that way and starting to build a broader, so I call it a DevOps culture, but it's really just a culture in general. A community is really actually what I call it. And so that's actually been incredibly powerful, just getting people to talk and to realize it's amazing how often people are like, I'm facing this challenge, and then they meet someone else and they're like, holy cow, I'm not the only person facing this challenge. Like, I thought I was unique. It's like, no, everyone sort of faces similar challenges.
This is one of the pillars of DevOps in your movement, is this sharing. And I think that applies to the sharing that happens inside of an organization and being able to take advantage of the fact that your comrades, and then also sharing, and this is sort of what's happening here at a place like the Summit, is sharing across the industry, where we're all communities of practice that are solving similar problems.
One of the big stumbling blocks I've noticed is that people are unwilling to share if they don't feel like they have a positive message. And by positive message, I mean I've done something amazing and I want to share it. It's like, no, share what you've been trying to do that's just like you're bashing your head against the wall. Chances are someone else has had the same problem, or at least a similar one, and you work together and collaborate and fix it, right? And so that's kind of the whole point of sharing, is opening up a little bit and saying, you know what, yeah, I can't figure this out on my own.
So, Polly, tell me, you guys had this blog, like, and you started some hip chat channels. Like, how do people know to even go to read the stuff on this blog? Or
it's all me, right? So for meaning that they've kind of had fits and starts in the past across these businesses, and so but there's never been anyone dedicated to kind of building this broader community and sort of bringing sort of I guess sort of the DevOps ideals, right? Just sort of the tenets and mantras around collaboration and sharing and having some empathy and understanding and being willing to say, I admit I'm not the smartest person in the room, and that's okay, because I'm going to ask some questions that other people may already know. And having that freedom to be able to do that allows you to really ramp up learning so much faster than these sort of fear-based economies that a lot of enterprises face. And so it's been fantastic, but it requires someone dedicated to that task. They've tried it in the past, but it kind of just like fits and starts and then it peters out because no one is really dedicated to it. So they decided we need sort of that's why I kind of call myself like a DevOps Sherpa or therapist or whatever. But it's really just one individual constantly kind of beating the drum of like, oh, hey, that's a great thing that you're talking about there. How about we share that on the blog? And then I generate conversation around that by getting in it, sort of seeding it with questions, and it actually picks up pretty quickly. And now, of course, it doesn't have 100% participation, right? There's always going to be some folks that just aren't going to be interested. But
lurkers are fine. They're participating just by reading the content, right?
Exactly, and they're learning ideally, right? Even if they're learning in sort of their own way, and that's perfectly fine. And in the end, it's been a really positive experience. I've had a lot of great conversations with folks talking about, I never knew this tool existed, and the interesting thing is, again, I think myself included, I fall victim to this, is, I kind of almost internally am like, really, how could you not know GitHub existed, right? It's like, I can't even fathom that you'd never heard of this idea or, mantra, and so I have to remember that some of these folks, again, have been in organizations that have been doing things one way for a very long time, and change is scary.
We haven't changed our architecture since 2004.
I love when someone says something like that, or it's better. It's like,
that's how good it was.
That's right. It is a badge of honor, right?
Put a man on the moon. What's the problem?
Hey, did your software architecture come from 2004? No, I didn't think so.
That's right.
So hey, there was one thing about the CF Summit that I can't believe I forgot to mention before now. For those of you who didn't get to go, you might have noticed on the program that there was a lunch on Monday. That was the diversity lunch. Sam Ramji and the CF Foundation are very dedicated to making sure that Cloud Foundry is synonymous with inclusion and diversity. And so we had a really great lunch on Monday, and one of the really cool things that happened there was that Robin Hauser Reynolds, who's the director and producer of Code, Debugging the Gender Gap, did a keynote. Pivotal is one of the sponsors of that film. And one of the coolest things that she reported that day was that they premiered the movie at Tribeca about a month ago. And so they're doing some private screenings and some film festival screenings. 2 of the screenings that she told us are coming up this summer are 1 to Congress and 2 to the State Department. And that is way cool.
And Cornelia Davis, I'm not sure with a head tilt or not, is definitely in that movie. So check it out.
So Cornelia, I'm glad you said that. If you hadn't, I was going to make sure that got in there. I want to call out some stats, which is that this was no small thing. It was standing room only with 125 people, right? So 125 women.
Yes,
So
that's right.
very, very well attended. And I want to make sure that Abby Kearns gets credit for having jumped in on that and taken it from being sort of an ornamental lunch into something really meaningful. And I think that attendance and the response that you're having to it, she really worked for exactly that, and I hope to see more of it.
Yeah, it was really fantastic. She did just a remarkable job, and in terms of continuing, it doesn't end with the lunch. That was just the beginning, and a group of us continued the conversation even after the lunch and started brainstorming some things that we can do. There's so many different places that we need to address. We as an industry, we as a community need to address diversity and gender imbalance in technology. It's both at the very young age, education-wise, and also there's quite a number of women who are trying to re-career, and there's lots of groups like Women Who Code and Black Girls Code and all of those things that are really addressing some of these areas. And so we've been brainstorming possibly doing some curriculum development that includes Cloud Foundry. How cool would that be if Cloud Foundry was a place that young people could deploy their web apps, maybe even in elementary school, get their own page deployed or something like that. So if anybody's interested in participating in that conversation, please reach out to the CF Foundation, reach out to Sam, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Abby, anybody who is part of the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and please join us.
So I would add to that the Cloud Foundry Foundation had diversity scholarships for the CF Summit. They would actually cover travel and accommodations if you applied for that and they were so inclined. And then I would also add, and Abby works for me, and I'm really pleased with the effort and the outcome that went into that. But as much as there's a gender divide in technology, there's an even greater people of color divide, and I'd like to see us put some energy into working on that as well.
Absolutely.
And with that, we're good 93 minutes into.
Oh man, I'm just getting ramped up for the next 90. I got so many more summit talks to discuss.
Hey,
where are you guys going?
Before we go,
we're not going anywhere.
All right. Well,
maybe we should make it a two-part series.
Before I go.
Before this intermission, I wanted to also give a bunch of credit to the London team, which is enormous and never on CFAD because of the time. But essentially all the data services that are coming out, that's them. And I don't think people have quite the appreciation of how important that is going to be overall to the success of Cloud Foundry is really, as Bear was saying, moving it beyond just this is some 12-factor apps.
So in a month when I move to California, should we keep the time the same, or should we move it to later? And then we can pick up. we could probably have London and Asia if we go late. I like it. Well, we lose the East Coast.
Then you'll lose the East Coast, exactly.
Not that there's a ton of them watching live, so.
I got a lot of feedback at Summit that most of the East Coast folks who are CFAD fans just watch it Monday morning.
That's right.
Yeah. Did anyone else, by the way, see the Lockheed Martin talk? And does anyone else remember what music they got to walk onto?
I don't.
They walked on to Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone. Do you know how badass it is to be the company that makes jets and then walk on the Cloud Foundry Summit with Kenny Loggins' Highway to the Danger Zone? I was just stunned. I was like, that just happened.
Moments in Cloud Foundry history.
Hey, Dr. Nick was agonizing over what music he was going to walk onto. What did he end up going with?
No idea.
I only have one song, so it's preset now. It's easy.
You know, I went with Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood, which I think you would have remembered. So I'm hoping that he chose wisely, but if no one remembers, that's not a good sign.
Hey, Ben, this is Jason. I was interested in that too, as you know. I recommended Cult of Personality. He chose Walking on Sunshine.
You know, I think that either of our options would have been significantly better than that. But I know that Nick is a lover and not a fighter, and so maybe he wanted to tone it down a bit. But I think he should have gone big.
Should we take an intermission, and whoever doesn't want to go to bed can do After Dark Part 2?
Yeah, I'll just stay on here talking about the talks I liked for another hour by myself.
How about we end the broadcast so people only have to commit to 100 minutes at a time?
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Good night, everyone. This was fun.
Absolutely.
Till next time.
Thanks.